what was really cool about it is that I can actually study, learn from others because I could see the leaderboards. I could see who the top reps were in the country of capturing leads or getting sales. And what I would do is I would just like go and look at their process. I would jump in their notes and see exactly, what were the notes that they took? Like, what was the cadence that they reached out with calls, with emails? What is something that they're capturing when it comes to notes that I'm probably not asking that question, right? So I'm literally just studying it as if I would study a basketball player of like, why did he, make this move in that crossover? Why did he change speeds there? That's how I think a lot of that sort of translates. And beyond that, what I would do is it's the extra time outside of work. So extra time outside 100%. Of work, like, I would be studying the product more. I'd be studying the cars a lot more. Same thing when I was at New Balance, I'd be studying the shoes a lot more. And then it was just kind of an hours thing.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine. It's my pleasure to have my friend, Josh Lyles. He's the founder of Salesdash CRM. He's going to be on today's show. Josh, welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. How are you today?
Doing well, Thomas. Grateful to be here.
I appreciate you coming on today. I know you're busy. But first, I wanted to say congratulations. You guys sponsored a golf hole event, I think on Monday. That was the first one you guys have done. So I just want to say congratulations. It's a big milestone to be a sponsor at, a Freight Golf or a supply chain event. So, congratulations on that. How did everything go?
I appreciate it. It was great. It was a golf event here in Nashville, sponsored by BitFreighter, Brad Perling and his team. And it was great because it was supporting a great cause for ALS research. And hot day, but overall we had a good crew. I had a good crew that I was playing with, and wish I sank some more putts, but overall, it was a fun time.
Yeah, those greens can be fickle on some of those days. I haven't played golf. I'll say probably like 2 years, and I'll honestly say if I went out and played today, I would be terrible. So.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, man. I don't play enough. It inspires me to get out there more though. I love golf because it's so mentally challenging.
It is. It's been tough for me because I came from the Midwest. So my time to golf was April through like November. And being here in Texas, I've kind of had to shift that from like November through May. Because it's just like today, it's going to be 102 degrees.
It's too hot.
It's too hot. I'm not going out there to play 3 or 4 hours of golf in 103 degree heat. It's not worth it. So I've had to like switch like how I play, and it's been a little bit weird. And I think that's why I haven't played. It's just like that mental switch of like having to play in the winter time as opposed to playing in like the summertime.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been able to switch in my head, but we'll kind of dive in, a little bit, so tell, kind of the listeners about you, Josh Lyles. How did you get into, the freight and supply chain world?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Marietta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. I really started off in sales actually at New Balance. It was kind of more of a unique, first selling experience because it was more hands-on selling, but it was a great experience for me. And I think everybody should always start in retail or, the service industry because you just learn, the one-to-one interactions, you learn service. I mean, everybody should really go through that because sales is involved with a lot of stuff, but it was great because, that we had to tie people's shoes and we had to watch them walk. And it was like a very consultative approach. And then I transitioned over to Tesla, as a sales advisor for them and kind of worked my way up the ranks and, got into management. And then, fortunately was able to land here in Nashville. It was actually between Pittsburgh and Nashville, and luckily got to Nashville, was their store manager for, at that time, it was their only location here in Tennessee. And then my two first friends that I actually had met here in Nashville, they had worked for a logistics company. And it's funny because they were always hanging out with their coworkers, which is kind of odd for me because it's not that I didn't hang out with my coworkers, but every single time, we would like meet up for a dinner, go meet up for drinks or anything like that. At that time, they were always with their coworkers, but that was just kind of the tight knit culture that they had. And then I just kind of got to a point at Tesla where I wanted to explore outside options. My long-term goal had been to always start my own company, but I wasn't really at that point yet. I didn't really know what I wanted to build and develop. And so I was just looking for other jobs. I wasn't tied to staying in Nashville. And There was a really unique opportunity at one point, logistics here in Nashville, and that's who they were working for. They were growing very fast. It was unique because they were owned by Keep Truckin', who now goes by Motive.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason why that opportunity stuck out compared to, I guess, just the typical freight brokerage is that they're owned by an ELD company. Knowing where your trucks are, tracking and tracing is obviously a big thing that is in the industry. And so, and just with the growth and, going on site 3-4 times that I had to go on site for all my interviews, I could just feel the culture and I wanted to be there. So fortunately was able to get in. I was their third sales manager for their location here in Nashville. And then they built out a second office in Chicago with 3 other teams to follow. But that's actually how I got my start. That was more of a short-lived opportunity. Unfortunately, it was awesome for the time it was there. I was super excited, honestly, even sometimes more energized than some of my days even at Tesla, just because of the energy that was there and the talent that was at that company. But that's how I got my start.
No, that's really cool, man. So I know you I want to dive into something you said. You said you knew you always wanted to start your own company. Mm-hmm. When did you know in your growth, or have you always known from like a young age that you were going to be an entrepreneur, you were going to start your own company and do your own thing?
That's a good question. I don't think from a young age I knew that. I think I always knew, like, one thing I had growing up was just always work ethic. Right. That was always the biggest thing for me. Like tennis was actually, as a young kid, was actually my best sport, but I didn't enjoy it as much. Like, it got boring to me, as stupid as that might sound. And I ended up playing basketball, and I'm only like 5'10", I'm not the 6'6", like 250, all that stuff. Not ideal for the, point guard, shooting guard, but I wanted to play because
Isaiah Thomas, listen, there's all the short kings out there, man. We gotta give love to the short kings.
Exactly. But there's few of those out there. So that's what makes it challenging. But yeah, so I did that, and I knew I had to work harder because, I wasn't, the tallest, I wasn't the fastest, the strongest, all that stuff, but just worked tirelessly so many different hours, and then eventually ended up walking onto a D2 school at Augusta State University. And I mean, ultimately it was really when I was transitioning away from basketball when I was at Augusta, and then was moving back to go finish up my degree at Georgia State, and just knowing that basketball wasn't going to be long-term for me. Best case scenario was going to be to play overseas, and that just was not going to be it. And my knees weren't honestly even in great shape at that point. So it was really at that point, and honestly, even some influence from my dad. My dad, he's been a radio consultant and programmer, and has been an entrepreneur and, himself for 30 plus years in that space. And just kind of like watching him, navigate that, and just, always kind of just being around the house, listening to him operate and talk to people on the phone and what he had to do. I think some of the influence came from that, and like also seeing his work ethic. And then, it's also just the same thing with basketball. Like I'd always study the players that I wanted to sort of learn from. And then when I got into business, the same thing. I wanted to study the leaders, that are in the spaces, no matter what space you're in, but everybody's got their own unique story. And so I'm always inspired by that. And it's just a simple mindset of, okay, if other people can build things, I feel that I can, and I love leadership, and I'm always challenging my abilities to continue to become a better leader. And so that's awesome. That's kind of how that got started.
No, that's awesome, man. And touching on something, you said again is I didn't know you were a D2 athlete. So how do you think transitioning out of college athletics, and you said, you really had to work a lot harder than a lot of your peers because you were shorter, you didn't have a lot of those, those intangibles and those gifts of, height and those skills. So how do you think, those skills of working harder than everyone else, that work ethic and that hustle, how do you think that really helped you, with where you are today in your professional career?
Yeah. A multitude of different ways. I mean, one thing I can absolutely tie this into CRM, but growing up, I was a pretty quiet kid. I was very introverted. I typically would listen, which I think actually helped me in my sales career because I was just more prone to listening than I was talking. And it's always one of the biggest skills that you need to have as a salesperson. But, even when it came to that, I always share this as an experience, especially even when it comes to the CRM world. But when I first joined Tesla, it was my first exposure to CRM. It was it was just a lot. Like I'd see all these fields. I'm like, why in the world do we have this like super complex system? But what's really cool about it is that I can actually study, learn from others, because I could see the leaderboards. I could see who the top reps were in the country of capturing leads or getting sales. And what I would do is I would just like go and look at their process. I would jump in their notes and see exactly, what were the notes that they took? Like what was the cadence that they reached out, was with calls, with emails? What is something that they're capturing when it comes to notes that I'm probably not asking that question, right? So I'm literally just studying it as if I would study a basketball player of like, why did he, make this move in that crossover? Right. Why did he change speeds there? That's how I think a lot of that sort of translates. And beyond that, what I would do is it's the extra time outside of work. So extra time outside 100%. Of work, like, I would be studying the product more. I'd be studying the cars a lot more. Same thing when I was at New Balance, I'd be studying the shoes a lot more. And then it was just kind of an hours thing. And Elon, just like Elon being the old boss and sort of just, some of his general principles, he always just talks about the person that puts in more hours. And it's not always to say, okay, the person that puts in more hours is going to win, because there's definitely the people that work smart, just harder and not smarter. I'm a big believer in working smarter. But, for me, the outside hours, especially today, and what I do is, okay, the main three skills that I'm always trying to build on are sales, marketing, and advertising. And so I'm always
skills you need.
Yeah. And so I'm always spending a lot of the time outside, and I'm genuinely interested in it. But how do I get better at those things? Because all that is, one, going to sharpen me as an individual, but it's also going to make my business and those around me better too. So it's honestly just kind of a natural thing where it's just what I really enjoy. I don't enjoy, all the numbers sometimes. Like, of course you have to know your numbers and all that stuff, but I'd rather somebody else that's like, that's what they're super passionate about. Like, those are the three skills for me that I've identified, that this is what, gets me energized, and I'll go to a coffee shop on a weekend and that's my fun. I'm not blinking twice to do that.
No, that's awesome. So something I'm, firmly passionate about as well, it sounds like you are as well, is practice. You're talking about practice.
Talking about practice, man.
So, I mean, it's interesting, because something I noticed coming from the freight brokerage background, TQL is where I got my start. And as I moved forward in my freight brokerage, when I was at Full Sail, no discredit to either brokerage, but we didn't do a lot of sales training, a lot of sales practice. And that's I hear that from every broker I talk to, and even carrier reps I talk to. They don't do a lot of practice. But it's just like you said, like, professional athletes, or even when you're just trying to learn a new skill in life, you have to practice that skill. Otherwise, you're never going to improve, right? Like, a basketball player doesn't come out at 2 years old and he's like Michael Jordan and ready to go. They've got to put in all of those hours every single day. And that's the stuff that, we don't see, so we don't think about. We just think, oh, these guys are great. Like, they put in a couple hours a week and they're good to go. But,
right.
Even in the off season, like, I listen to a lot of basketball podcasts. I'm huge into basketball as well. And so I listen to like podcasts with like Paul George's podcast or things like that, because they're just really interesting to hear kind of like the backstories of how, they work so hard, even in the off season. They talk about having to, their trainers and like their family have to actually tell them, like, hey, like, you need to chill out for a couple of weeks. The season's over. Like, you need to let your body heal and rest and relax. Even though you want to get back on the court, you got to rest a little bit. But it's all about practice and repetition. And the better you get at what you're doing, and the more you practice with your peers or your friends or your, whoever it is, you're going to improve your skills, and you're gonna overall improve your overall career, because you have to spend those times. You can't just take for granted like those calls you're making all day as a freight broker and say, okay, like, I don't need to practice. No, like, you do have to practice. You do have to adapt, because if you're not practicing, you're not adapting, you're not learning, new skills to really find those pain points and adapt yourself to the market. Like, the market isn't the same as it was 5 years ago. It's not the same as it was 6 months ago. The markets change, and you have to adapt to, those changes.
Yeah, I think one other thing to build on that, because this is really my transition coming back from Augusta to Atlanta, and the reason why, honestly, I dropped out the basketball team was really actually the mental aspect of it. I was just losing my confidence. It wasn't from a lack of practice and whatnot, but I just needed to build more mental toughness like that. And I had to tackle that head on. So,
Absolutely.
I would read and absorb content on mental toughness. And when you talk about the Jordans and the Kobes of the world, I love to listen to them. Like, I think anybody can be your mentor, especially with the content that's out there. And I'm a big YouTube listener in the mornings and all that stuff. And so the reason why that those guys are so good, there's guys that do run faster, jump higher, as crazy as that may be, but there are guys that are more athletic and honestly even more naturally talented than the Jordans and the Kobes. But the reason why that they are the Jordan and Kobes that we admire is because of their mindset. It's just it's a whole different game. So sharpening that's really important, and that's always something that I still to this day constantly am always working on, and it's definitely helped. And in the sales world, I mean, I always start with mindset. Like that's one of the biggest things because you're dealing with rejection all the time,
all day.
It doesn't really matter who you are, how good you are, relationships with individuals. Obviously you want to follow a sales process, but you're going to get no's no matter what. And you're going to get more no's than you get yeses, and your mindset to just keep going forward is crucial. So that's on top of the practice, that mindset piece is crucial.
It is. And even to just touch on that even further, even the best sellers, like the best enterprise sellers you meet, the President's Club sellers, they deal with rejection the same way we all do. It doesn't matter. They still have that rejection. They just find ways to push through the objection and find ways to push through no and find ways to not let those things impact them. Like you said, it's practicing that mental toughness and just getting over the constant rejection, the constant no. But, kind of switching up a little bit. So I want to touch on, Salesdash CRM and how you built that. So how, after being in logistics, you said that was a little bit short lived. So what did you do after that? What was your next phase, and how did Salesdash kind of come about?
So I actually came up with the idea once OPL shut down, One Point Logistics shut down. I was honestly like I think anybody else was frustrated at the time. I had built a team of 12 from scratch.
Definitely.
I felt, I had a really solid team. Like I felt like our results were trending in the right direction. Things were going in a really good path for myself and the team. And then, 9 of them got let go, and I was fortunate to be retained from Keep Trucking at that time. But I just got to a point where I was like, what, I really want to go start my own thing. I don't know what it is. And I'm not one of those people that's going to kind of sulk and just beat myself up constantly or, become a victim.
It doesn't do any good.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I was still fortunate to have a job, but I was like, okay, I've saved up money from, my past 6 years in sales now at this point. I've saved up enough to go attempt something. So went to a coffee shop for a week and I said, I'm going to go brainstorm ideas. This is literally how it went. And the first thing I started with was, what do I feel that I'm very good at, that I feel that I can help others with a little bit more.
Right.
As strange as it may seem, it was CRM software. It was just, there was a time period when I was at Tesla that it really clicked for me. I was put into one of my most challenging times in my career where I went from our higher volume store in Atlanta to our lower volume store. They had no managers. I was still a salesperson. My sales targets were higher. I had to work to actually get the team to kind of adjust to the habits that we had at the higher volume store, which, for somebody that doesn't have necessarily like higher performing habits is a challenge. Right. So, and then I got to manage the whole store. So higher sales targets, all that stuff. I had to get more organized, more disciplined. I'm waking up earlier. I'm getting into the store earlier. But I actually found when I got more organized in the CRM, I had more time in my day, and I also was selling more than I ever had. And I was crushing my goals at that time. So it was great. And and that's what helped propel me into management. And I think at a young age, get into management at that organization and, be able to have the influence that I had across the org, because management was a little bit easier for me just because I also had sold, so I could connect with the sales reps, at my store, but also in the region at a pretty good level. So that's kind of, ultimately sort of where it started. And then when I was thinking about ideas, I was like, okay, well, Salesforce is very large. I know, HubSpot's very good in the marketing space. But I was just checking out their workflows. I was checking out what all is out there. And I also know how expensive that they can be. But I just felt that there could be a more slimmed down version from workflows, from me understanding this very well from a salesperson's aspect and a manager's aspect. And then working with my peers, noticing like it was just more of a compliance tool for them versus like, hey, this is a tool that's actually going to help you fuel your sales growth. Whether you are a salesperson, it should not be like, I'm just doing this to comply with my manager. And as managers, it shouldn't be like, for your upper management or just to say like, hey, we hit a KPI, hit a target. the goal is to get more sales. So, right. So it's how do you structure it in a way that's better. So man, like my process was, I'm actually just more of like the action taker, I'd say, more than like the big planner. And so I just started taking action. I drew out sketches on paper. I'm like, okay, if I was to click here, what would happen? My eyes from left to right, top to bottom on the screen. The design was really important. So I actually had about a month and a half when the OPL shutdown happened to before Keep Truckin' slotted me to my next team. So I actually spent that time just networking with developers, engineers, people in the industry, like what would be some good approaches. I was able to interview probably like 6 developers. They're awesome. Both offshore. I've been working with them ever since. So we've been working for close to about 3 years now at this point. We've developed a really good relationship. So I started building with them. And then long story short, my go-to-market strategy was not great. I'm very open and honest about this. I, had read and listened to all the entrepreneur stories about niching down and that kind of stuff. And I didn't do it. And so for 12 months, one, I had never actually built a SaaS product. I had never sold a SaaS product. So this was all a new challenge for me.
Brand new.
Yeah, but I don't, for me, I'm also not going to run away from challenges either. So my go-to-market strategy was bad. I started with solopreneurs, and then I started with, small, just inside sales teams in the SMB space. And it was just too broad. And then I ended up actually going to be a server at a restaurant nights and weekends to basically do Salesdash during the day, do that to continue to keep my developers paid, keep it bootstrapped. Yeah. And then Andy Shields, who's the president and co-founder, he was the former president at One Point Logistics and went to start off Silo here in Nashville. Gave me a call, wanted somebody to come help and oversee the operations team, more so on a people leadership side. So I went and joined them for about a year and a half. I was their head of operations for about 7 to 8 months, and then I was their head of sales for about a year. So I did that, and it was a really good experience being there because they were a niche down brokerage. They're in the open deck space, oversized, high value, time sensitive kind of freight. And even just like seeing that approach was really good. It allowed me to get deeper because I got to go be an operations lead and kind of understand like how in depth they get into operations and their, attention to details. Yeah. And their attention to detail and just process was just deep and, really useful to go through. And then on the sales side, it was good to just get, further experience in that kind of selling. And then I guess just like going forward, I left in November because I wanted to go expand my skill set and really just try to make Salesdash happen. And so, it actually wasn't until I really wanted to just figure out a better go-to-market plan. And it took me about 3 to 4 months post leaving, which is not also the most ideal thing I think for entrepreneurs to do. So I have done some stuff pretty backwards, but it was like, look, I'm gonna go and run off and I'm gonna try to figure this out. And in February of this year of 2023 is when I actually just was like, all right, I come from the logistics space. I can talk to these people. I know their world. I've coached some really. Yeah, I've lived it. I've coached some really successful sales reps. I've onboarded closed shippers myself from when I first joined OPL. And I'm like, this is a much easier conversation. So a week went by, I had much better conversations, added some ops to my pipeline. April, I went to the TIA Capital Conference Ideas in Orlando and met a ton of people, built a lot more connections, got some customers out of it. And it was really honestly like post that conference was when I just said, okay, cool. We're going to go freight brokerage 3PL only. There's enough in this space. There's a lot of opportunity. We can build our product, more in this space. And so in May of this year, this is just 3 months ago, I rebranded everything from our website, social pages, everything to freight brokerage 3PL only. And from here on out, that's where our product development will be going forward in.
No, that's really fascinating because, you live the freight brokerage life. Like you've lived that lifestyle. So it's really a product, built from a salesperson perspective, a freight broker, a freight manager perspective. Like there's not a lot of those tools that are built like that, right? Like when I was at TQL, their CRM was an in-house built tool. Mm-hmm. So it was built around their needs, and it was built, 15 years prior. So it was very clunky. It was very old. It ran very slowly. And when I moved to Full Sail, we were more, I won't say spreadsheet oriented because we were a much smaller brokerage when we first started, but it was HubSpot and it was Apple Notes. It was kind of everywhere, right? And that's how a lot of freight brokers are when they start. They're just kind of scattered because there isn't really a tool, a CRM that is specific for freight brokers and the freight brokerage needs. So it's always been kind of hard as a smaller brokerage to say, okay, like where can I, really hone in on my sales? Because a sales lead in freight is a lot different than a sales lead in manufacturing. That
Hmm.
deal in manufacturing has maybe a value of $500,000, $1 million, but you don't know, you don't really know what the value of a client's going to be in the freight world, because it could start off as, they tell you, oh, we've got 1 or 2 lanes, but they could end up having 50 lanes, and they're just trying to see how you're going to service them on smaller opportunities before they give you those bigger opportunities. So there's really not a good correlation in the sales CRMs for freight brokers, because there's just not enough, niche tools or niche opportunity fields for freight brokers. So I think it's a really interesting, pivot from a lot of those smaller, just um, all over the place, everyone CRM, to just kind of honing into that specific need of freight brokers. So how has that pivot been over the last 3 months? How has business been for you guys since that pivot's happened?
The pivot's been great. We get really good feedback on the simplicity of our system.
That's awesome.
People, we're constantly hearing people really like how it's built for freight brokers. And a lot of it, like you mentioned, kind of comes from the field. So it's already templated out from day one once you actually sign up,
That's
to
awesome.
where it helps you a little bit more and be a little bit more guided in your sales process to capture things, like equipment types that a shipper's moving, the modes, if they do spot or contract freight, what are some of their common pain points between, communication or on-time pickup and delivery, that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff, right? So it makes it easier to, let's just say, okay, you have 2 new sales reps or 10 new sales reps come in, whatever your process is, right? Like, hey, we want to always ask these questions. We want to always understand this information about each shipper. You can systemize that and make it easy for somebody to step in and say, it's not exactly a call script, but it's more so to say, hey, this is a good
It's
guide,
like an
and
outline.
more of an outline. And hey, this is
Yeah.
the ideal shippers for us. These are the questions and the information we want to know about them. And from there, kind of the back end piece of it is, okay, how do you even scale out your reporting from there? Because one of the things that is going to happen over time is you're always trying to figure out your ICP, right? What's the ideal
Yeah.
shippers for you to go after? And that's always one thing that's important is, between like a smaller shipper and enterprise shipper, it's so common for brokers to want to go after the enterprise shipper, but, having a good, healthy balance between the two.
Guilty.
Yeah. And, just
Guilty.
paying attention to the annual revenues. How many employees do the best shippers that you work with today? Like, start with operations, the
Yeah.
one like where your most profitable freight is and what the characteristics of those shippers are. Break that down. And that's going to help you in your lead generation process to say, hey, these are the most ideal kind of shippers for us to go after. You can build your sales process to ask those
Absolutely.
questions, tell those stories of those shippers that you're servicing today, to make sales honestly easier going forward. And you can make it very simple. It doesn't need to be super complex. It doesn't need to be, 20 things. It can be 5 things. It could be 8 things, but it is going to make your life so much easier. So we're to give people a good foundation. And it is very cool because we'll have people that have hired outside consultants or, big implementation packages that have cost them 5 figures plus, sometimes over 6 figures. And they'll see our CRM, and you basically can start it with a free trial, and they'll be like, yeah, this is, it's just a little bit more customized than what we've got today. And it's not only that, it's okay, there's a deeper level that you can go with your actual internal sales process, even from what we
Right.
have. Right. So what we want to do is continue to deepen that. And at this point, it's much stronger on the shipper prospecting side, but from there, we're looking to also grow it on the carrier side. But the feedback has been really good. We've been able to get over 20 brokerages be active subscribers with us this year. And we're just,
That's awesome.
looking to grow that, continue to build the pipeline and work closely with them to, one, understand what their needs are and to continue to develop our product development roadmap.
No, that's really fantastic, man. So it sounds like just in the last 3 months, you guys have made a lot of like big, big steps forward with the company that you may not have made if you hadn't pivoted to what you're at today, right?
Yeah, for sure. I will consistently say it was my biggest mistake not niching down. It's the biggest recommendation that I can make now at this point, and I definitely approach it. But sometimes you got to make the mistakes that,
You have to make
get
the
your
mistake sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, get your hand slapped a little bit, and just so you know what not to do going forward. But it's been a lot of fun, man. Like I'm having a lot of fun building it. I think we're going to be able to build some pretty unique differentiators for us. To me, like we're still early on, and so for those that are
Absolutely.
working to build the relationships with us, I think that they're going to see immense value in it going forward. And we're a team that like we scrap hard. We're gonna actively work with our customers. We want the feedback. I don't really care. The positive feedback is always great. I want the constructive feedback though. I'm a big small details person. To really work hard to get to the point where people feel that, hey, this is the most absolute ideal system for us, and it's also affordable, much more affordable compared to the other options that are out there.
No, that's really interesting, man. I'm happy that you guys have made that pivot, and you've been able to stay like in an industry that you like and are passionate about, and then can also take those tangible skills and really help other freight brokers and other freight brokerages, and really be able to say, okay, we can help you with your sales processes just through our CRM. Because just like you said, if you're onboarding new people, and the systems you use, the easier they are for those new people, the quicker they're going to get up to speed, the quicker that they're going to start, from a management perspective, start creating and generating revenue for the company. And that's
Yeah.
the ultimate goal, is to be able to make your salespeople as effective as possible with the tools they're using. And so I think Salesdash is really like, is gonna have a lot of success in the freight brokerage space, because there's really no other like bigger competitor, like you said, like in terms of CRM. Yeah, there's the Salesforces, there's HubSpots, there's Pipedrive, there's plenty of really good CRM tools, but they're
Yeah.
not catered for freight brokers. And a lot of what you said, pain points for shippers, looking at what how many loads they're moving a month, there's just so many different things that you can add in there that that other CRMs don't have, and you're
Yeah.
not able to do that. So
And you
I
can't.
just think,
Here's the reality too: is that you can add a lot of that stuff in there. There's going to
yeah,
be limitations, I think, with
it's
certain things
yeah,
going forward. Especially when it comes to like capturing lanes and that kind of stuff.
absolutely.
But freight brokers, man, a lot of times like they don't slow down, and I'll
It's
try to talk
hard.
with them and say, hey, like all you got to do is just get some of this in there. But it's just a fast
If
paced
it's
world,
not
and,
easy
and
for them, it's going to be, you
they're
can build
gone.
out, yeah, you can build out
Yeah.
all of those tools. Like you said, you can build all that out, but at what cost? Number one is, if you use a Salesforce, if you use another tool, what costs are you going to have to build those tools internally inside of those systems and update everything? And number two, how easy is that for your freight broker to use? Are they going to update it? Like you
Hmm.
said, it's a very fast paced world. And I did sales for I've been in sales for 12 years. So I know salespeople don't like to use CRMs. I am guilty of not using a CRM. I've
Hmm.
been that person. And once I realized how vital my CRM was, and like actually keying everything in right after it happened, so that it's fresh in my mind and I have all the correct details, just like what happened with you, my pipeline skyrocketed, and I had the most success I ever had once I started to use a CRM. So it's just one of those tools that if you're actually utilizing it properly,
Yep.
it can be your best friend. But as we start to wrap up, Josh, what are some of the, I guess, from your perspective right now, what are some things freight brokers can do to kind of stand out from the crowd? As brokering gets a little bit tougher, what advice in terms of sales would you give them to kind of help stand out and be creative?
It's a great question. My mind goes, I think, a number of different places, but I think the first thing is that a lot of people just struggle with process in sales. You got to work to get
Yeah,
some kind of process, right? If you have a better plan in place, it's going to be easier to make the dials. It's going to be easier to say, hey, this is going to be our call or email cadence, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
It really starts by saying, like, what's your actual game plan and what has worked in the past that you can continue to build on? And then how can you continue to critique it from there? And a really good place to start is start with your best people in the organization. Really unpack what
yeah.
they do. And sometimes, if you're going to build out some of the process, like start with them, and then from there you can continue to build it out with, and don't neglect, even some of your bottom performers, because there's going to be some really good things that they can still bring to the table as you guys are brainstorming this. But I think that's really important. Um, one of my kind of general principles is that I'm a really firm believer that behaviors drive metrics and results when it comes to sales. And so, if you're not getting the results that you want, you should slow down to identify what are those behaviors that you need to fix, so that way you can speed up to get the results that you're looking for. I'm a big believer in that. And that's going to be stuff with calls. It's going to be stuff with emails. Like there's small things in it. When it comes to the calls, it's going to be what's your opening line. Obviously, testing some of those out. Really paying attention to your tone and your cadence. Not just talking about yourself. Like trying to get to the point where you're talking about the shippers that you're talking to is very important. So there's some small nuances in that. If I'm a manager, it is going to start with the metrics and KPIs that I'm measuring. I don't think it's a good practice to just say, hey, like we've got this random metric and then we're pushing it out to the team, but we're not going to talk about it with them for the rest of the month, the rest of the quarter. That should be daily, weekly stuff. So, one of the things I say in some of my content that I push out there is what gets measured gets managed. And it really starts with the managers to become better coaches to say, hey, these are the things that actually move the needle for us, right? Calls, if it's talk time, if it's emails, all that kind of stuff. Like what, pipeline generation, won deals, lost deals, disqualified reasons, that kind of stuff. What are the things that you're measuring to say, this is what leads us to success? Like one small metric, for example, that we've built into Salesdash now for anybody that signs up is a simple cadence metric that lives on the dashboard for the salespeople and the managers. So for the salespeople, whether it's you haven't contacted a shipper in 14 days or 30 days or 60 days, familiarity is a big player in the game when it comes to just, do they know your name? Do they know what company you work for? And do they know the services? And have you stayed in touch with them constantly enough and persistently enough, not to where it's too nagging and they block your number and they put your email in the spam, but in a good cadence to where like you're staying in front of them to where they know about you. So when the time happens where they need you, that way, like you're front of mind that they're thinking of, you're the first person on the bench that they say, okay, cool. Exactly. I'm going to pull you into the game. And, I've got a load for you to test out here. So, I think that's, again, like it's very important from a management aspect because, again, pushing that down, it shouldn't just feel like compliance to the salespeople. You should be guiding your salespeople to improve those behaviors. And that's what's going to get them results. And that's what's going to prevent the friction that you commonly see with salespeople and managers when it comes to CRM.
Absolutely. And
to actually make it to where it's, hey, like we're in this together and there's reasons why the salespeople actually want to do this, and for managers too. Because if the salespeople at the same token, if they don't understand the impact that the CRM can make for them in their sales process, it can be a wasted effort. And you're not going to get the data as managers. You can be getting, data that's just not as accurate as you're really looking for to tell you the right story and the right narrative.
Yeah, if you're putting it's shit in, shit out, basically. If your people aren't putting in good info because you make it feel like it's a chore and they have to do it, instead of making it like, hey, this is our process because it's going to make you more money. It's going to help you build more pipeline. It's going to help you further your ultimate goal. And I think that's also something that's kind of lost with sales managers is they push it a lot of, we've got to hit our numbers. But when you break it down to an individual performer's number and say, hey, what is your ultimate goal? It's like what you said. It's like setting up these KPIs and then just forgetting about them. It's helping. It's basically being a coach to your sellers. Like, going back to the front of the episode, we're talking about basketball and the way you have to be, hustle and things like that. It's also, your sales manager has to kind of be that coach and that leader and say, hey, we're going to work on some of these intangibles and these skills to help you hit the goals you want, right? We want to win the championship. We want to go to President's Club and hit our goal. We want to be 112% this year, but we can't do that without each one of our individual performers. And like you said, it's not always about being, that 1 through 5. If you can be proactive and stay front of mind with your shipper and be that sixth man, that seventh man, that sixth and seventh man are just as important to help win a championship. So it's like, if you just set yourself up for the long-term success and don't think about, if I do this today, what are the effects tomorrow? That's not always going to be the case, especially with CRM and management. Sometimes if you're just putting those tasks in there and putting in that pertinent information, it's going to help you remember and retain. Like I was talking with another with another sales leader recently, and it's all about just remembering those small details with a shipper. So
1000%.
if they've got kids and they just had a birthday and you talk to them on Wednesday, the next time you talk to them, ask them how their kid's birthday was. Ask them how their wife's birthday was, because it's going to show that you remember, that you actually care, and it's not just a transactional relationship. I say this in almost every one of my podcasts. Make sure you're building the relationship. I know a lot of people say in different markets, the relationship doesn't matter. I call bullshit. The relationship always matters. It doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. If the market's good, the market's bad, that relationship is going to drive you forward, whether you're on the carrier side, the broker side, the shipper side. Having that ultimate relationship and knowing, like, just knowing your stuff, being in that niche and garnering that credibility by, knowing your stuff and being that proactive person and telling them, hey, things are happening in the market. Be truthful. So that way you're just that person for them. You're not you become the starter over time. You become from the seventh man to the fifth man to the starting role to your highest paid point guard, because you can ultimately help them excel their business. So I think that's kind of one of those things, like just doing what others aren't doing.
Right.
And just
having patience.
Having patience. It's not always going to be an ultimate. Today, I'm going to end up with 10 loads because I called one shipper.
No.
If they're doing that, they can pull the freight just as quickly. So you want to have those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody's willing to just let you in the door that fast, a lot of times like they're going to be, they're going to be willing to do that for other people.
Yep.
I think you touched on a lot of good things there. One of the first things that you said, though, for example, is when it comes to like, okay, making all these calls and these activity goals, I think where a lot of people do go wrong is they'll just say, hey, you got to make 50 or 100 calls a day. Well, you're not giving any rhyme and reason to salespeople when you just say, hey, you got to make 100 calls a day. Because realistically, any smart sales manager should sit there and say, if you're getting 10 real connects with a shipper, like shippers a day, that's really what you want. That's fantastic. I would rather have 10 actual connects with shippers versus just like 100 calls. Because most of the time, if you're getting to the 100 to 150 calls, you're getting a ton of no pickups, you're getting a ton of left voicemails, and you're not actually moving the ball down the field in terms of building a relationship with them, right? So
I agree.
You can reverse engineer the math. It's all math, right? But hey, it took this many activities to generate this many new apps. It took this many apps, and with a 20% close rate or whatever your close rate is, to say this is really what our activity goal should be. Like an OPL, my activity goal from me doing my math with my team, and with we were still a little bit of a younger team, but typically it was like 70 activities and 90 minutes of talk time a day. That was really the math that I said, hey, this is going to give us a really good formula for success. I put more emphasis on the talk time because, again, that's what's actually building relationships. I couldn't give a damn about like 100. Really, again, 125 calls, great. But to me, it's one of two things. Again, a ton of no pickups and left voicemails, or you're sitting there and you're talking about yourself because your talk time's low. You're not asking the right questions because you're not getting the shippers to open up, right? Exactly. So I think that's important. And you made another very good point on the notes piece, because I always say this. I don't think that I'm naturally the best salesperson, but I had very good success when I was at Tesla when I was a salesperson. The reason being was because I treated my job as a salesperson almost like a doctor would. If you go to the doctor and if the doctor is not asking you questions and they're not taking down notes on the things that you're asking them, the next time you come in there, if they start asking you the same stuff, you're going to be a little worried, right? Or you're going to be frustrated.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I get it. Like, data entry is frustrating, but in freight in specific, you're making so many activities a day. Let's just take the 70 number. That's 350, after one specific week. I am not going to remember those small details, but those small details are what actually move the relationship forward. I'm not going to remember those if I'm not willing to actually document what those are. So it's a small thing. It's a slow down to speed up mentality, but that's what actually can help you become, as like I would say, be perceived as a better sales professional, because you're not asking the same questions. And if I'm on the other end, and you should always put yourself in the buyer or the consumer's shoes, but if you're getting asked the same questions from the salesperson, you're going to be frustrated because you're going to say, hey, I already told you this information. You're not doing your job well. So if you miss those details, you're going to miss those details with the trucks.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to be detail oriented. And honestly, it just shows your lack of commitment to the details, right? So if you're just asking them every single time the exact same questions. One, it feels like an interrogation for them because
Correct.
you've already asked them. If
Yep.
you have to think about it from their perspective and put yourself in their shoes. But ultimately, they're not going to trust you with their freight. They're going to say, okay, we talked 2 weeks ago. He's asking me the exact same questions. Like, what's going on? Is he not listening? Is he not taking notes? I mean, and here's the thing:
they're going to hang up.
Yeah, they're going to hang up, or they're going to stop taking the call, or they're eventually going to say, "Hey, we're happy with our providers. Please stop calling us."
Yeah.
And you'll lose the opportunity. There's lots of opportunities out there, but if you have a good opportunity and someone who's willing to listen and give you that potential time, you don't want to waste that opportunity, right? You don't want to waste good opportunities. So it's all about being that person, taking those notes, and you don't even have to take live notes. There's so many different ways in 2023 you can take notes. The call can be recorded. You can have AI draft it afterwards. With calls like this, if you were on a video call with a customer, you can have recorded calls. You can have those notes that automatically generate from your talk to text. They'll do that for you. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. You don't have to, if you're not big into actually taking the notes yourself, be just use AI, use a tool to help you be a better salesperson. So ultimately, do what others aren't doing. Grind, hustle, and be that pro athlete of freight brokers. Be that person who's going to go the extra mile, who's going to be that niche person that tells their shippers exactly the way it is and exactly the way things need to go. Because even a lot of times these shippers, they may not know certain details, right? Even though they're shipping these things every day, they may not know certain aspects of the market. That's your job. So just, bringing them those details so that they, can make the best informed decisions on their freight.
Spot on.
But wrapping up here, Josh, I appreciate your time today. We're here about 45 minutes. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think your story is so interesting and valuable, and you've got so much knowledge in terms of what you're doing in the CRM space, but not just that, just from the sales perspective, from all of your different angles that you've worked and from the bottom to the top, grinding it out and making that pivot for Salesdash and really, making that, that change that you should have maybe thought of made in the beginning, but didn't, and then made the right pivot. So I think it's very valuable to share, not just the wins, but some of those failures as well, because we all fail. And a lot of times, those failures aren't shared and aren't shown. So I like to, bring people on who aren't scared to share some of those failures that we have and share hey, if you're going to do something, choose your niche right from the beginning, because that's kind of your ultimate thing. Is if you had chosen your niche a little while ago, things may be different. But here you are today, and things are growing massively. Josh, where can people find you online? How can they follow your content and get in touch with you if they want to follow?
Yeah, best place to be LinkedIn. First name Josh, last name Lyles, Lyles would always be the best place. And then our website for Salesdash is sales-crm.com. You can always schedule a demo. Demos typically don't take too long. Again, it's a pretty simple CRM, but if you schedule a demo on there, I'm going to be the one that hosts it so we can have a chance to talk. Awesome. And if you find me on LinkedIn, feel free to shoot me a DM, and happy to connect on a phone call or video call.
No, that's really awesome, guys. All of Josh's info will be down in the description of the podcast and in the YouTube video. If you like today's podcast, please make sure you like and give us a review. And don't forget to check out our twice weekly newsletter on Monday and Wednesday for freight brokers, shippers, and tech and truck drivers. That's thinkfreight.io. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Josh, thanks again.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.